Hi, everyone, and welcome to Sense's webinar, all about staffing and hiring and how to staff your laundromat with a winning team. I am so excited to be here live with you today with two incredible operators who I'll introduce in just a moment. But in the meantime, I'm Sivan. I'm Director of Product Operations here at Sense. And we have some amazing content heading your way today. First and foremost, I see a lot of people trickling in. Drop it in the chat. Where are you from? Is this your first webinar? What are you most excited to learn about today? Go ahead and just, add some things in the chat. We'll be able to see it. And I'm glad you're getting into the practice of adding things to the chat, because throughout the webinar today, if you have any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the Q&A. You can feel free to drop them in the chat, whatever works best for you. And we will get to them, as the time allows us to. But without further ado, no one's dropping in the chat. I'm so happy you guys are all here today nonetheless. Awesome. April Ashley, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Thanks so much for being here. I think I've seen your name before. But outside of that, we are so pleased to be here with two incredible operators who actually have very different trajectories into the industry itself. So I'm excited for you to hear two very different perspectives. First and foremost, I'm excited to introduce John Cooper from WaveMAX Hialeah. John actually just opened his doors 2 months ago, if I'm not mistaken.
April 8th.
April 8th, even less than 2 months ago. So the whole concept of training and staffing a laundromat is very, very fresh to him. And this is just one of hopefully 3 stores that he is going to be opening within the next couple years. And I'll also pass it to Waleed Cope from Brooklyn, New York, who actually, on the contrary, has been in the industry for almost your entire life, if I'm not mistaken. Your family came from the industry itself. So how long have you had the soapbox now for in Brooklyn?
The soapbox has been since 2016.
2016, but you've had, ties to the industry for a lot longer than that. I believe you had said that your dad ran a laundromat and you've been in and around the industry forever. So super excited to hear your perspective and how, things have changed and where we are today as an industry. But outside of that, we're going to dive in. We're going to get started. Again, if you have any questions that come up, anything you want to say, you can feel free to drop it in the chat. You can add it to the Q&A and we'll get to it when we get to it. But first and foremost, when we think about hiring and staffing our stores, one of the things that really comes up is just recruiting for talent, recruiting for people to actually staff the store. So John, this is something that's so, new for you, or rather recent for you. Could you describe the process that you followed to develop a recruitment strategy? Like, what did that look like for you?
So from a franchise standpoint, we have a few rules. We have to be open 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. We have to be a staffed laundry. So going in, I knew I had to set, a setup of hours we had to cover. And having been in the HR business for 35 plus years, I've done a lot of recruiting work. I've done a lot of recruiting implementations. So I had an idea about what I wanted. And what I've found with a lot of winning teams is you generally need to hire more for attitude and then a few key capabilities. So one of the things I put in place was an internet-based applicant tracking system. And I wanted to use it as a gating mechanism because I was going to have Sense, going to have Laundroworks. Computer illiterate people were going to be a horrible problem for the laundry. Didn't matter how great they were, how pretty they were, or anything else. I needed people that could step through a process. And so use that as the window to drive it. Ended up getting some help writing a good job description for the internet. My first attempt flopped. And then I got some real help and they helped me rewrite it and make it marketable. And I got a much better result from that. And the good thing about the applicant tracking system is you can qualify as you come in. The system I use, Applicant Pro, I can set up a bunch of job qualification questions that let me score people. They even have online interviewing and a few other things I didn't pick up and use, but I use that to really scale. The other thing that I have that's a little unique to my market is it's really a Spanish-speaking market. You could walk through the streets of Hialeah and literally never speak English. The city of Hialeah answers the phone in Spanish. And so my staff is really, I had to rewrite everything the franchise had into Spanish. I had to conduct most of the interviews in Spanish. And so it's a little bit of a different market, but that's really what I was looking for. And in my case, during the ramp up, most of my staff ended up coming from recent immigrants. And so in one lady's case, and she turned out to be my top employee, I had to wait a while for her to get her green card cleared because she married an American. Others, I turned away thousands of people that were illegal, and trying to broker a deal. They wanted to use Waleed's social security number. They wanted this, they wanted that. There was all kinds of, craziness with that. But that's really what, and then I was looking more for people who were methodical, need things orderly and neat, and like to follow process. But I also looked for people that weren't afraid to challenge things, because it's a brand new laundromat. I'm the Jon Snow of laundry. I know nothing. I'm figuring it out as I go. And so I needed people that were willing to put up their hand and say, hey, boss, this doesn't work. Why are we doing it like this? You want me to do this, but if I do these three things differently, it'll work much better. So had mostly good luck with it. Lost a few people. I hired a couple people too early, and my opening got delayed, and I lost them. And then I had one young fellow who, the spirit was willing, but the flesh was weak, and showing up on time was a major challenge for him. So I had to let him go.
So I think that there were some really incredible nuggets of information there. You mentioned a program called Applicant Pro that you utilize. So if you're, I've never heard of it, but it sounds like it's an incredible tool that allows you to facilitate like online interviewing. You also mentioned having an internet gated application, which I think is so modern, so important. And, Waleed, will pass the question right back to you in a second. But being able to qualify someone's ability to actually utilize technology in a space that is just ripe with technology. And you also mentioned that you hired people maybe a little bit too early. Some people were eager, but not actually effective. Really understanding the qualities that you're looking for. But one of the things, Waleed, that actually leads me to is, how do you identify the specific skills and qualifications required for a particular role? I know that you have managers, for example, you have processing employees, you have delivery drivers. How do you qualify those and identify those skills and requirements?
Yes. So it's always a challenge, and there is no secret formula to figuring out the hiring process. There's steps, there's qualification pieces we can put in play, but you truly don't know until that team member gets off the bench and starts playing. So we try to put as many things in place to have them check boxes that we've seen other team members exhibit throughout the hiring process or while working with us. So similar to what John spoke about, we use an applicant tracking system. We've used Hire Pro, Zip Recruiter, Breezy, you name it. We've used quite a few of them, and they're very informative, and they have a lot of pieces in play that you can use. And one that we use quite often is called a questionnaire. So they fill out an application, and it will either send them a link, or after they fill out the application, it asks them a series of custom questions. And we craft those questions to identify the key things that we're looking for. And we're not asking like how many pounds can you fold in an hour, or have you worked in a laundromat? Our best team members have zero experience in a laundromat. They've worked in like the hospitality industry or the food industry. So we'll put questions on there like, how do you work? Are you a team player? How do you work with other people? Have you played sports before? Scenario-based questions, how do you handle this type of situation? Clients upset at the counter because the credit card machine is not working and they're in a rush. So we asked them these different questions, and that questionnaire helps us to get a better picture. As John mentioned earlier too, the application / the job posting, we've experimented with that numerous ways in both of our businesses, which hire the same demographic. So it gives us a little more insight to be able to take it from one of our larger businesses and apply it to the laundry, because people are our product in our other business, where in our garment care, laundry and dry cleaning, sneaker cleaning is the product. So we've gone from like really high level detailed job ads to now we just go to bullet points. And it's just like, here's the salary, this is the location, this is what you're required to do, this is the position, click this link to apply. And then that link drives them to our applicant tracking system. And when we get to the interview process, we're reinforcing those questions that were asked throughout the application or the questionnaire process.
I love that. And again, you mentioned some really great tools, HirePro, ZipRecruiter, Breezy, just to get those applicants in the door, but understanding the profile of the employees that have been successful for you and your business and trying to recreate that magic, I think is so critical. And I loved the suggestions that you had made, or the questions that you ask about sports, team, hospitality, customer service facing. So many of these things are so critical when you're on a small team. And when you are trying to provide a luxury service to anybody who's walking in the door. So, having somebody understand how to engage with those customers and provide the best experience is so critical. It's a reflection of you and your brand and your company.
Yeah, but let's be clear. It's still a crapshoot. I don't care how much technology, how many interviews you do, you're still rolling the dice. And when we finally figure it out, is either they do some kind of shadow period. Like we tell them in the interview, listen, you can work 3-4 days. You've never worked in a laundry before. Come work, see how it is. I'm going to pay you for those like 2 to 4 days. And you let me know, do you like it? And then we're filling them out at the same time. I'm sure John can speak to it. Once somebody starts, like the 3rd day, give or take, like I know, I'm like, they're not going to make it, or they're going to be a rock star, or they'll be good. First week, like couple days in, like the way they come in the door, they show up on time. Do they bring something to write with, like a pen and a paper? All these little telltale signs tell a lot.
Absolutely. Barbara actually has a question just on this topic of sourcing and recruiting candidates. She said, when you're hiring and advertising, is the job at will, or is it like full-time? Is it part-time? I assume it's an at-will position, meaning you can be fired for any or no reason. That is, most, I think, employers today are at-will employers. But in your experience, at least, John, recently, is it full-time? Is it part-time? And is it at will?
So Florida's a right to work state, so it's at will. In my case, I have 2 folks that are full-time and then 3 that are part-time. Including one, my young guy he's still in high school, but he's working 3-4 shifts a week. And so I advertised as both full-time and part-time. Got preferences from people because different people had different availabilities that they really wanted. And it worked out as far as the selection went. Because I had one lady who has a child, she's got to pick them up from school. So she wanted morning shifts. Mm-hmm. The high school kid, he needs the evening shift. And so it worked out from that perspective. But it is important to have coverage and to have a little more than your required coverage, because sooner or later, something's up. Like in a couple of weeks, one of the ladies has to move. So we're shuffling schedules to make sure she can go move and not worry. And then we're finding ways to recover shifts for her so she doesn't lose overall pay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You always have to have bench players ready to go just in case. And same question for you, Waleed. Are they full-time posts, part-time posts, a combination?
Yeah, so we're in New York. So the law in New York states that all employers technically are at will, because you can end the employment agreement at any, I shouldn't even say agreement. You can just end the employment relationship at any time. We hire for full-time and part-time. Federal and state laws are different when it comes to full-time and part-time. And we've made it a practice to state exactly what we're looking for. So when we say full-time at our firm, we're talking 40 hours a week, 8-hour shifts, 5 days a week. And then part-time, we tell them is anything less than 40 at our establishment. So we found to be very clear in our ads and very upfront in the interview versus in some ads, there's a lot of bait and switch going on to get people in the door. And then when they get there, they're presented with something else. So we put the shifts in the ad, the days of the week, the times, how many hours, full-time, part-time. We put all those details so they come in the door knowing what to expect. And that transparency encourages them to be open in an interview when we have it. And when we get to the interview, we can definitely talk about those strategies.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the interview because that's actually my next question. So thank you so much for the segue. The question really now, what I want to talk about is identifying these candidates. So Waleed and John, you already gave us some incredible tidbits about the types of things that you're looking for, and ultimately understanding that no matter what you see in the interview process, no matter what you recognize in the interview process, it all comes down to execution and how they show up when they actually start working. But is long-term commitment or potential for retention something that you seek out in this interview process? And if so, how do you assess that element? I'll start with you, John.
So yes, in my case, I'm brand new, so I'm just getting open, but I don't want to be hiring every day all the time. So I was trying to find people that looked like they were finding a situation, and my star was actually newly becoming eligible to work. So I wanted to rush and get her before somebody else did. And she's turned out to be the one with the most suggestions, the most good ideas, the most innovative behaviors. Like she's taken my very bad merchandising of product behind the counter and revamped it like 4 times in 6 weeks. Right, you got to do this, we got to move this, we got to do that. So trying to find people that are more or less stable and around was part of what I wanted to do. I also picked people who were pretty close. 2 of my 5 folks walk to work. One rides a scooter. The young guy has an electric scooter. So being close was also something that I wanted to make sure I picked up on. And then I also, to be honest, tended, the top candidates in my case were all middle-aged females that were solid, past a lot of the young age drama. The young guy's my outlier, but he's been very steady, and actually he's my tech expert, and he coaches all the ladies and makes sure they're comfortable with all the technology. So it balances out, and they watch over him and make sure he's where he needs to be and doing what he needs to do. So it's worked out. But a lot of what I've found is in building teams is you got to find the people that don't change all that much. And in my case, my employees came from, a couple of them had worked in COVID facilities doing, injections and things like that. So you look at that and you're like, they're tough. They can deal with difficult people, because if you waited in any of those lines, by the time you got to where you got your COVID shot, you were not in a good mindset. And so they had a lot of the real customer service skills that you want to have. You can make somebody happy giving them a COVID shot. Laundry is easy. Nobody walks away from laundry generally unhappy because their stuff's clean. So there was a lot to that. And then the other thing that I had to try to balance was, in my case, 4 of my 5 employees really only speak Spanish. The ladies just are not real English fluent. And so I had to finally give on that. I was trying to get bilingual folks and do the best I could with that, but I had to give on that one. And the truth of it is 98% of the people who walk in would prefer to speak Spanish. Yeah. If you speak English to them, you're throwing them off. What are you doing here?
You understood your demographic at the end of the day as well. No, that's super interesting. And, I want to pass that question back also to Waleed, because Waleed, I've had the pleasure of visiting the Soapbox, and, I feel that there is a really incredible dynamic amongst the staff there. And I I get the sense that a lot of them have worked with you for a long time. And I don't know if that's just how comfortable they felt, or if they've actually been there for a long time. So when you're looking for your candidates, are you looking at that long-term commitment, retention, and what are those maybe magic factors that you're looking at to identify those qualities?
Yeah. So I used to have this checklist. And then after somewhere in my career, after I did probably like my 1000th interview, I threw it out the window. There are certain things that we look for, like, do they show up on time? What's their appearance like? We've had people show up in interviews with three-piece suits on, and then I've had other people show up like they just came from the gym. And the one in three-piece suit totally bombed, and the one that looked like they came from the gym was a rock star. Like there's no perfect checklist anymore. It's things have changed so much. So one of the things that I do is I'm very upfront in an interview. The first thing I tell them is like, you're not here for an interview. We're two adults having a conversation about entering into a long-term employment relationship. And I tell them long-term for me is, a year to 2 years. If I'm not expecting you to work here the rest of your life, if you choose to, kudos to you. Like we'll rock this out together and like dominate the industry in our market. Otherwise, like, let's just make the best of the time that we're together. And the goal is for you to leave here better than you came in. So I tell them that straight out. We're having a real conversation. I was like, I'm straightforward with you, you be straightforward with me, and we'll figure out a good path forward. Otherwise, we'll just shake hands if there's no meeting ground and no hard feelings. And the second thing we do is I have another team member sit in on the interview so we can get a different perspective. So it's not just my perspective, because my team is going to spend more time with that person than I do. I'm at the store now way less than I used to be in the past. Thank goodness, because the team is doing a great job. So it's removed me from that equation. The other thing we look for is like, do we get along with the people? And you mentioned it, Simon, when you were at the store, like everybody felt like they've been there for a while. The longest person has been there maybe like our manager, I think like 3.5 years. I'm horrible with time, so forgive me. And then some of the other team members have been there like maybe a year, 6 months. It's a range. But in that interview, we're looking to see like, would I go hang out with this person after work? Would I want to go eat dinner with them? Like, do we get along? We're in a small space and we work close together. So one of the key things is we're looking for, do they have a great personality? Are we going to have fun while we're working with them? If not, we're like, yeah, they're really good. They know what they're doing, but it's just probably going to bump heads later on. So yeah, I would say those are probably the top 3 things we're looking to check off: their personality, another team member signs off on them, and then just how they carry and present themselves throughout the interview. I shouldn't say the interview, throughout the discussion.
And I really appreciate that. I love what you said about just like you are not good with time. I will just say COVID really messed us all. It was a vortex. Like I don't know what happened for the last 3 years. But I really appreciate that upfront, expectation setting of what long-term employment relationship means to you. And hopefully, ideally, you have someone who's in it with you as a partner, but at the very least, you're investing in somebody who can bring you that return for the foreseeable future. So investing in your employees, one of the things that really comes with that is training them, especially Waleed, you mentioned, and also John, you mentioned that you are working with people who have never actually worked in the laundry space before. And obviously there's so many intricacies associated with this. So, how does training differ for someone, or what is your training program for someone who is starting out on the floor? And how do you assess those training needs? Do you have a standardized training program? Is it just they're shadowing? I know, Waleed, you mentioned shadowing, but John, I'll pass it to you first. You just recently trained a lot of people.
Right. So since we're making it up as we go along, we had to bring in, so we brought in the Laundry Lux guys, and the Laundry Lux installer trained us all on basic machine operation, a lot of details. We're getting videos from them from the franchise, so that some of the service related tasks and things like that get put together. My distributor has also contributed. They've had to come out a couple times, and their guys just know stuff, and so they were giving us a lot of pointers. We had a good set of training documentation that we put together from the Laundromat guys. Sense has great training, and Sense actually did training for my staff in Spanish. And so, you know, my ladies were very, very thankful for that, and it went really well, and we've got it recorded. So if I got to run it again, we can run it again. So that was very effective. And then what we've done is we've kept the handbook and procedures up and live, and we're changing them as we go. Some of the, you know, the franchise, for example, opening and closing the cash drawer. The franchise wrote it one way because that's how the CEO of the franchise does it, but he didn't have Sense. So he didn't have cash drawer functionality. And so we've had to rewrite it and rethink how it happens, rethink what goes on with it. You know, and using screens from Sense has made a lot of the wash, dry, fold and product ordering and things like that pretty easy, because you can narrate that. And my wife is very good at Loom. She uses that a lot in her homeschooling work for our homeschooling families. So she showed me how to use Loom to do short videos for how to train. That's worked pretty well. And then we also have, as we innovate, the staff trains each other. So the morning hands off to evening, or about, you know, and then so we kind of round robin it if I can't be there all the time. But we're still, you know, figuring that out and making it up as we go. And as things have proven either practical or more difficult, we've had to change a number of things.
It's all evolving. I appreciate that. It's not just one static thing. And, you know, as you continue to bring in more technology, new processes, et cetera, it's just an evolution. And, you know, Waleed, you famously say you have tried every single system out there. You have, you know, had the soapbox now for over 7 years, and, you know, many, many staff, I'm sure, just over that course of time. So what does training look like for a new employee joining the soapbox team?
Yeah, so it's very similar to what John touched on. And I agree wholeheartedly with both the point you both touched on. And we must remember this as operators and owners. It's always evolving. And no matter what we put in place today, there's going to be some changes, additions, or some caveats to it down the road. Like, I'll get phone calls during the week. They're like, yeah, somebody brought in this item and it's not listed. Or one of our commercial clients, they're sending in other items that are not in their current price tier. And we have to, you know, make adjustments to the SOPs and to the dashboard for them to be able to get those items. So when it comes to training, the first thing we do is they work one-on-one with somebody for the first 2 weeks. We use a couple of the same technology platforms that John mentioned. Loom is awesome. Do screen recordings of, you know, how do you work the register? How do you work the tablet, et cetera, or any other tech pieces that you have on the back end that they have to interface with. We also use one Scribe, so it's easy to capture screenshots and then put them into a manual, whether it's printed or digital. Notion is huge for us. We document all the SOPs and everything in Notion, so it's easy for them to access. And we also use Slack. So all those are the 4 basic things that they use during the training period. There's videos for them to see whether the video is a screen recording or actually doing something in the store. So they can log on after hours or during hours when it's slow, go into Notion, pull up that video that's listed in the SOP that says, you know, how to rack an order, or, you know, how to separate the order that's under the minimum, et cetera. So a lot of that is documented either in written format or in video and images, which we found is tremendously helpful for them. And then they shadow for 2 weeks. And then during the first week, we're telling them and we're showing them. And then the second week, they have to show us everything that we showed them the first week. And we'll typically go, you know, might go 3 weeks, 2.5. If they don't have it by like a week and a half, 2 weeks, we're like, yeah, it's probably not going to work, because there's a lot of moving parts on outside, because we're doing 3 service lines: dry cleaning, laundry, and sneakers. So they have to be very mindful of, you know, different fabrics, different sneaker types, customer service problems, et cetera. But the shadowing I found is the biggest piece for us that works. They're hands-on, we're showing them and we're letting them do it as we go through every process.
I what you said resonated with me so much about just making that quick decision within the first 2-3 weeks of if it's going to work out or not. And I know that, John, you also said this about one team member who was great on paper, but just never showed up on time. And I think that across the board in my career, you got to act fast. You got to trust your intuition. And, if it's not working out, if it's this hard now, it's not going to get any easier as time passes. So just trusting your gut and being quick on your feet is so important. And Waleed, you mentioned, and John as well, but you mentioned some really great programs that I want everyone tuning in to really pay attention to. Loom, for screen recordings. You mentioned Scribe to be able to put into manuals. Notion, we use Notion as well. It's an incredible place that you can basically compile handbooks and notes and just keep running anything really that you need. People use it for many, many different reasons, and Slack for internal communication. I think that you have a little bit more of a sophisticated operation from a technology side with how you're managing your internal communications. We love Slack here at Sense as well.
It's not that sophisticated. It's really because if you like, let's be like, and this came up when we were talking at Excellence also, like, let's really think about it. The average stuff that they're using in other industries or in other businesses, some people will look at it from the laundry aspect and be like, oh, that's like really sophisticated what you're doing because it's laundry. Like, we actually end up discounting ourselves more because we're in the laundry industry instead of pushing our expectations higher. Like, why are we not using Slack? Why are we not using like different communication apps in the industry? Like as a whole, like people use them at agencies, every one of my SaaS providers, we have a Slack channel that I communicate directly with their team for whatever they're doing. Let me not say everyone, but almost every one of them. And like that would be so easy. It's so easy to use in laundry. Like, we set up a channel. We have a channel for client services. We have a channel for sneakers. We have a channel for dry cleaning, and we have a channel for general store discussions. And like every team member is like, after hours, you should see our Slack. People are sending messages, like giving each other kudos. And we're like, hey, this client called. Make sure when you come in tomorrow morning, you do X, Y, and Z. Like, that's way better than leaving paper notes. And ladies and gentlemen, it's free. Like, it's free 99 for Slack. Like, you can use it free. The only thing that you can't do is you lose your history after 90 days. And if it's something after 90 days you really need, pay for 1 month, turn it off, get that data from past 90 days, and then go back to norm. Like, or you need to document stuff, use Basecamp also. It's free. You can set up different sections for different parts of your business, interact with your vendors. Like, sorry, John, let me shut up. Your turn.
No, I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with you.
You're way past where I am.
Yeah, no, seriously, I'm obsessed with you. I love this. You've always been such an advocate for technology in this space, which I think, this is where Sense also, it's ripe for disruption, this industry. And I totally hear you. One channel that you're missing though is a pets channel. You need to add a pets channel so people can post photos of their pets as well. We get like literally midnight messages on this channel of just like, look at what my dog is doing right now, and it's just a really cool way to engage. But I love that. Everybody, Slack, incredible tool. We're obsessed with it.
I'm writing that down right now. We need a pet channel.
We have a music channel. Yeah, we have everything. So in any case, I love that. And Brian actually has a really great question here, just related to recruitment and general staffing. Do you always have a job listing out there to make sure that you aren't missing out on good candidates, or is it only when you really need to hire somebody? John?
So I haven't gotten to the point where I've turned mine off yet. I have had a couple of cases where candidates were upset that there wasn't a lot of activity. And so I've had to change my approach on how I respond to everybody and what I do so that I stay on top of it. But as I get into my 7th week, I'm getting ready to shut it down for now because I really don't need anybody right now. And I can reopen it very quickly if I do need it and pay for some Indeed advertising. And that's given me a steady supply of folks. And what I'm seeing now, interestingly enough, is I'm getting applicants from other laundries.
Interesting.
So, but I've kind of played that close to the vest. I don't want to be interviewing people unless I'm going to look to hire them. I don't want to be using them for, competitive knowledge I should be gathering myself anyways.
Absolutely. And, Waleed, you've obviously have had your staff. Are you always having a posting out there, or what's that situation like for you?
Yeah, so we've done both. We've always had at one point a link on our website where people can click the careers and then they go into a queue. I'd say the past couple of years we've turned that off, and the experience we've had, and I've cross-referenced this with our other business where we're constantly hiring, because again, people are a product at that business, so we have to constantly hire. I found that when we turn it off and then we turn it on later on, we see way more attention, we see way more influx. And it's that whole supply and demand. When it's always up, people are just like, yeah, it's there. Like they become numb to it. But when we shut it off and we turn it back on, the floodgates come. Like I hear people all the time telling me, and I'm not disagreeing to a certain extent, I can't find people, the market is tight, et cetera, et cetera. I hear you, but I don't hear you. And what we do is we use Craigslist. That's going to cost you a little bit because you got to pay for job ads. And people will tell me, oh, Craigslist sucks, Waleed. We don't get enough people, or they're not quality. Listen, every market is different. I can only speak for in New York. I put an ad on Craigslist, and it's how you manipulate it. We'll put it up first on Mondays. People are like, oh, no, you put it up on Fridays because the weekend people search for jobs. Wrong. People look for jobs on Monday because when they go to work, they hate their job. Like
I literally was about to say that
boards on Monday. Trust me when I tell you.
Yeah.
I've experimented with every days of the week. So first we put it up on Mondays. We'll put it up Sunday, and then I put it up again Monday. So I'm catching people like, oh, I don't want to go back to work, and they start searching. Craigslist will get a few good hits, but we get a lot of people, and it spreads the word. Then Indeed, free 99 again. Go on Indeed, create your company account. Create your company page. You can put videos from YouTube. You can put photos, all your history. You can put a whole bunch of information that pushes you up. You'll get a ton of people coming from Indeed for free. If you want to spend a couple bucks, then you'll get even more people coming. But the key is, how do you filter all those people so you're not going crazy? You set up Indeed with Calendly, free again, and you set up all your links. You put the questionnaires in Calendly if you didn't do them in Indeed or one of your ATSs. It pre-screens people. And listen, don't bring people to your store right away. Have them interview the first interview over Zoom. Like, don't waste your time setting up a bunch of interviews. You go to your store and these people don't show up. Like, I've been ghosted so many times on interviews. Like, we're waiting, people show up, they don't show up. I set up a Zoom link and I set them up in 15, 20-minute increments, back to back to back. They show up. Oh yeah, we talk. I'm like, all right, that sounds good. Good vibe. Can you come to our store next week? Sure. Can you come to the store tomorrow or Saturday? They come to the store, we sit down, it works. Then we send them an offer letter. So like we show them that we're serious. Everything is written, it's documented. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
I lost track of whether we were talking about dating and dating apps or applying for jobs, because I will say every single thing that you said, get off the apps, get back on it. Like, you talked about ghosting, how do you filter? Like all of these things really apply to that world as well. So
like you bring up a good point. If you look at finding team members like you date, like it's a big correlation between the two, and which is why I tell people in the interview, like, no gimmicks. No, I had a driving instructor when I took the road test to get my license many years ago, and the driving instructor, I got in the car, and this dude, like, he had a long day, and he did not want to be bothered with me driving this car around the block. He closed the door, he put in a seatbelt, he said, I'm gonna tell you right now, sir, no gimmicks, no games, no jokes. Drive this car. Don't break any rules, and you've got a license at the end of this test. And from that day, I was like, you know what? He was straightforward. I knew what his expectations are. He told me exactly what he wanted. And I was like, I need to take that into every interview. I'm not trying to like butter people up or sell them on some pie in the sky to get them to come. And then they come and be like, you don't have 401k, or you don't have this, but in the ad you said this, or in the you led me to believe that. No, like, this is what it is. You're going to be working in a 700 square foot store. We're going to be on top of each other. We're going to have fun. You're going to make some money, and we're moving a lot of dirty underwears. You down for that or what? That's it.
God, I love that. I love it. And I love the just say what you mean, mean what you say, like set that expectation properly from the start. mismanaged expectations lead to disappointment across the board, everybody. So outside of that, you did also mention some really great free tools. So just to highlight those insights that you shared, you said Craigslist is incredible. Put it up on Mondays, Sundays. That's when people hate their job most.
Yeah, but
it spreads the word.
Craigslist is going to cost you $45 in New York City. I'm not sure for job postings anywhere else.
$45, like, don't buy coffee for a week, in New York City as well. And there's your $45, make your coffee at home. I'm not trying to tell people what to do
with their money, but Indeed is free.
Yeah, Indeed. And then Indeed you mentioned, but also one important part about Indeed you mentioned was getting your company account and your company page up to par. I think that's, by the way, everybody here, if you have a laundromat, it's not just with Indeed with hiring. Get your Google My Business page set up, become a legitimate business, like any person who's going to be applying, hopefully is doing their due diligence. Make yourself presentable with your internet presence, Google yourself, see what comes up, and make sure that it's something that is appealing to any candidate coming in. And then you also mentioned Calendly. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, Calendly, sorry. But here's one thing people should use that doesn't get talked about a lot in our industry. We aren't doing background and reference checks. Like, people walk in and we're just like, okay, yeah, you want to work in a laundromat? Like, why are we lowering our standards so much? Like, I understand people like, oh, it's a shortage, I really need people. But we use Checker. It's super inexpensive and it's really fast. And we run background checks on individuals. Like, it says something to them when they have to go. And you'll be surprised. Like, we have people, when they find out they had to go through a background check, like in the middle of the application, they just get up and walk out the store. Like, while they're in the waiting area, waiting to have an interview. And I'm fine with that. Like, they've just saved us so much time. Like, background checks, do them.
Yep. And John,
totally agree. I do the
John shaking his head.
I do the same thing. And I ask people before I get into it, listen, I am going to run a background check. Is there anything you need to talk to me about before I run it? And
great point.
I had one girl not tell me anything, and then I had to not offer her a job because she got busted for shoplifting, which is a red flag. I had another guy tell me, well, I have a couple things. You got a rap sheet as long as my arm. I'm like, no. That's not a couple things. That's a lot of things. And so, and you look at it, you have a fiduciary responsibility to give your employees and your customers a safe place to be. And how are you going to look, if one of your employees beats up a customer? That'd be a little bit of a public relations and legal problem. And so, you owe it to yourself and to everybody involved to make sure it's safe.
Yeah. And the background check,
right. But
John brings up a good point. The background check doesn't mean because something comes up, you disqualify them. That's just another talking point. And when you use a background check software, it has a feature in it. When it discovers something on their background, you hit a button and it sends them this thing called, I think it's called like, tell us the story, the way they have it worded. And it's basically explain to us what happened in your words. And then you use that to have a different conversation. Like, somebody committed a crime like 15, 20 years ago, and the person is like 60 years old. I'm good with it. Like, what have you been good for the past 30 plus years, or, whatever the math is on that? And they're like, yeah, like they were 16 when they made a bad decision. And now the person is 60 years old and they've lived a straight and narrow life. Well, like, we're not going to hold that against them, but it's a conversation piece. And when a person is straightforward, as you mentioned, Sivan, and John touched on, that conversation becomes a lot more. And the type of person that you're going to be dealing with to a certain extent. That integrity, that comes up in that conversation.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate, that's Checker, background checks. And I love the feature of like, tell us the story of what happened. And I also just want to reiterate, I think you said something that was very beautiful, Waleed. You said, don't lower your standards in this industry. I think across the board, that is generally a mentality that people have. It's a laundromat, whatever. No, don't lower your standards. Make it the best place to work. Make it the best service that anyone can provide, and make people want to come and be there and work there. And let's make it sexy. Outside of that, I did want to talk a little bit about incentives. how we are incentivizing our employees. So I am curious, and John, I'm going to point this to you first because you've talked about incentives also for Google reviews. You just opened up your doors. So I think that this is also super important to hear. But what kind of incentives outside of an hourly wage are you offering to your employees right now?
So I have two programs right now. We pay 5% of every wash, dry, fold order that they process. And so that gets factored into the biweekly paycheck. And experience-wise, I look at the CEO's store in Jacksonville. I sat down with one lady. She's been there a couple of years, and the lady could fold like there was no, I mean, she was a machine. Her base is at a 14. She was making an average of 24 an hour because she could process. I mean, she was doing way better than 50 pounds an hour. And I mean, she was good. It was the most beautiful stuff I've ever seen. So you know, that's part of what, and the premise there is if my business grows, your paycheck should grow along with it. Second thing I have in place is an incentive program on a quarterly basis for 5-star reviews. Employee who gets the most 5-star reviews that mention them specifically gets an extra bonus. And so that's got everybody, you know, jumping in 6 weeks. We've got close to 60 5-star reviews, which is, you know, it comes and goes, but it's certainly an incentive. And then in my case, I use the rollover for business startups. So I actually do have a 401k. And so, you know, there's an eligibility period they got to work before they can contribute, but it'll have employer match as well.
That's incredible. And just to kind of echo how incredible that is, John has 60 5-star reviews. He opened his doors 6 weeks ago. That's 10 5-star reviews a week. If you want to do one thing to just help your internet presence, having online reviews is really incredible for your search engine optimization, your SEO, and also just for anybody who's considering coming to the store. So if it's something that you're incentivizing your employees to talk about, if you're talking to customers and just saying, hey, we just opened our doors, it would really help us. If you are using Sense Accelerate and you want to send a text message and say, hey, take a moment and review us and show us your review and get 5% off or 10% off your next order, whatever it is, that investment can be so critical just for your internet presence across the board. And Waleed, same question for you. Outside of an hourly wage, are you incentivizing your employees, and what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so I agree 100% with what John said, the incentives that he has and the structures he has in place. So we've recently stopped all incentive, not recently, but a couple of years ago, we actually stopped. And we're looking at the data and we're talking to our team members, and it's a little different mindset for us. And it was this, we've noticed some of the team members, there were bonuses involved, like they were chasing, if you ever seen that cartoon or that drawing where there's a carrot on a stick in front of the horse and the horse is just like steady going because they're trying to get to this carrot, but it's like, just keep dangling it, they never get it. So we would see team members who did like really well because they were chasing the money. But then after time, we would see, when they hit a certain threshold, it was just volume, and quality kind of, even though we had checks and balances, we saw the quality kind of just diminish. Or they were like, oh, can you write a review? Because they were like, oh, I need to get this review so I can get this extra money. So we kind of removed all that now. We're looking at it from a different perspective to say, who's a team member that fits what we're doing, who's going to give this great service like 80, 85% of the time and be well-rounded. And we just need to figure out how often do we need to increase their wages. So some of our team members, we put straight salary. We're like, listen, this is it. You keep doing that. You got nothing else to worry about. Here's straight salary. I don't care if you work 30 hours a week. I don't care if you work 40 hours a week, you work 15 hours a week, you take some time off. I'm still going to pay you that same rate because of what they were producing and doing for the establishment. So we're in that zone right now, looking at the dynamics and the data from that. And then we'll probably end up settling on some kind of hybrid model. We use a lot of incentive programs inside our payroll software, which I think a lot of laundromats need. Like I just sent a long email to a colleague of mine who we had a discussion of excellence. Like we should be rocking payroll software to make our lives so much easier. So we use Gusto, and there's a lot of features inside of Gusto. So we send them a survey every week that they fill out when they get paid in the app. So it takes a gauge on how they're feeling about work, their sentiment, et cetera. And then there's other pieces inside of it, like 401k, there's the healthcare. There's a lot of features that are like, and you pay at a fractional cost. Like I would give a heads up to, and this is off of hiring, but it's tied to it, workers' comp insurance. If you're not looking at your workers' comp insurance as a pay-as-you-go, I'm not saying you should do it. I'm encouraging you to look at it. Our old workers' comp policy, I had to pay you had the premium for the year and you made the monthly payments. And then you had to get the audit every year. If you didn't do the audit, like your stuff would shoot up. I'm just going to tell you right now, I switched to pay-as-we-go through our software, payroll software. And when I canceled our old policy, they had to write me a $7,000 check because we were paying, the way they had our workers' comp structured, you pay every month and then you do this audit at the end of the year. And they're like, oh, so you only have this many people, you hired only this many. It's such a old way of doing it. But look at the features that your payroll system can offer. So some of those features that help our team members, we offer direct deposit. And a lot of our socioeconomic base that we bring on as part of our team, they're unbanked. So then they end up going and getting, I won't mention any names, but they get these pay cards from these check cashing places or some of these other institutions, and the fees are ridiculously high. And it's like all these hurdles for them to use that card. Our payroll system has a card, like the most they pay is like $2.50, depending, what the ATM is or something like that. And they can have a virtual account and get a card, even if they can't get bank with a traditional bank. So we found like putting some of those mechanisms in place to stabilize their back in their life situation and make those things that we all take for granted. Let's be clear, we take them for granted, like having direct deposit, having a debit card, having a checkbook, et cetera, using Zelle and et cetera. We take that for granted. So putting a lot of those things in place, I think helps them out a lot.
I think that is such a good point. Outside of the financial incentives, just the incentives to have more access to your funds, which again, like you said, is something that we take so for granted. Love that you have moved some employees to a salary model because that works for you. And that's something that you've had to evaluate and that you've had to change over the years. I also love the employee survey that you're doing on a weekly basis. Again, yes, that's facilitated through Gusto, which is an incredibly easy to use. We used to use it here. Incredibly easy to use software. I highly recommend looking into it. Love the advice as well, everyone who's listening, to take a look at your workers' comp insurance and, potentially explore switching to pay as you go. I feel like a Geico commercial, but 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on workers' comp insurance.
More than 15%.
Yeah, way more than 15%. And then a couple of other things that I know of that we're not talking necessarily about financial incentives, but just, again, quality of life, potentially incentives. We know a company, also a startup, it's called Claire. And what they do is, you can always look into them. They allow hourly workers to get paid same day. For example, they will basically front it onto a card, and you can do same day payments instead of having to wait for your paycheck to come in on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. Chime is an incredible banking solution as well. If they don't have a bank, just providing these resources to your staff can also be an incentive in and of itself.
Just ask them; they'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Just what do you need?
Really, what we think they want, like we're probably wrong 70% of the time. Like our survey, or we have store conversations, they say like, oh, we just want a water cooler. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have to give you a raise. You just want a water cooler? Or like they work late. I have Uber take them home. So what a Uber cost me? 12, 15, 20 bucks, depending where they live in Brooklyn. And they're just as happy for that recognition, or someone just showing that they worked late and we put them in an Uber, or they come to the store early and the Uber picks them up at their house and brings them to work because there's a problem with the train. Like we think all these other things in our mind, they want to raise, or we need to give them all these bonuses. Sometimes they just want the recognition or like the pat on the back. Like, they just want to go get tacos on Tuesday. Like, you just don't know until you ask.
Yeah. And that one, you know, maybe $100 meal, and I'm being very generous with $100 Taco Tuesday meal in Brownsville. But you know, in the same regard, that is an investment in your employees that can really pay off over time. We are approaching time here. So I do want to make sure if you guys have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A now, because otherwise we will not get to them. But the last thing I want to share is, or ask about, is sharing customer feedback with your team. So, you know, good, bad, like what does that process actually look like? If someone is recognized by a customer, how do you share it to them? I know you mentioned Slack, Waleed. Is it something that you guys are all blasting on Slack? John, how are you sharing customer feedback with your employees? I'll start with you, John.
So for our sake, it gets captured through our web provider, Waleed. And so we get regular emails on it so we can keep track of it pretty carefully. And so my employees get to see it. And since we've got the incentive program, they're checking it regularly. So they're looking at what the feedback is. I did have one case where a guy was mad, but my employee followed all the instructions and the procedures we had. He was mad because she wouldn't let him cash a $20 incentive. His wife cashed her incentive and his incentive. And so, you know, I looped back with him and told him, man, you know, they did exactly what I told them to do. You should have both come in, because that's the rules. And so, you know, I ended up giving him the $20 anyways on the card, but that's really, we haven't gotten to the point where we've got so many. And then if I have had the very rare question or problem, you know, you triangulate it to kind of when you're coming in, what are the shifts? Because the bad feedback is going to come in real fast. People are going to walk out all mashed and want to hammer somebody. So you can usually triangulate it to the schedule. And it's like, you know, I got 6 kids, so you know you got to ask a lot of questions. Oh, how's it going? You know, and what happened? And then you kind of get them in from there. You can't walk in going, hey, what's this? What are you doing? Why'd you do that? You know, got to work around it, because people can be unreasonable.
Benefit of the doubt, if you will. Yeah. And Waleed, how are you sharing positive and negative customer feedback?
Yeah, typically we put in Slack. Like, I'm really bad at on the positive side. And it's something I still need to work on. And it's just a product of who I am and the environment I grew up in. It's just like, put my head down and keep working. Like, somebody says, oh, you did a good job. I'm like, okay, yeah. But to me, it's, I don't know, it's a saying in sport or in sales, like, you're only as good as your last sale. So I'm trying to get better at it, recognizing it with my team. But my goal is to just have a manager or someone on a team who's really good at that and just let them handle it. Yeah.
Very cool. Again, Slack, free 99, as you said. Last question from Kimberly for you. Waleed, do you employ a labor and employment attorney?
Yeah. But to be clear, Kimberly, our labor and employment attorney works across all of our businesses. So I want to be absolutely clear. It's not one that's just hired for our laundry business. And so I kind of cheat, because I get to ask them questions on the laundry side. But I really don't have, I shouldn't even say it. I'm probably going to jinx myself. But when it comes to like 0, thank God.
Okay.
Like, we follow all the rules. Let me be absolutely clear with this. I follow every rule. So the state says we in the city, or whoever, feds say we have to put up signs, I put the signs up. They say we pay tips, I pay the tips. I put it in their payroll. They see it in their pay stub as a line item, very transparent. Somebody, you know, does whatever, I'm like, hey, this is what it is. We have workers' comp. We have insurance. Like, I'm cutting 0 corners when it comes to that. I need to sleep at night. And if something happens to a team member, God forbid, I want to make sure they're covered. Like, we have workers' comp so they can go out. They don't have to rush to get back to work because they don't have any income coming in, things of that nature. But I've heard stories of people come in their laundromats and they file complaints about stuff not being like ADA compliant and all that. I would look around. I've heard of, I haven't tried them. just like there's fractional, like C-suite people, there's some fractional attorneys, they'll do stuff for you or look into it, and it won't cost you as much as having someone on retainer. I would really look to develop a relationship like that, especially if you're having issues or potentially could have issues.
Or just getting started. And it sounds like Kimberly might just be getting started. But John and Waleed, we are over time at this point. I can't say enough how grateful I am for the time that you've spent and the knowledge that you've imparted. For everybody asking, yes, you will get a recording of this afterwards, and we'll also include Katie, our incredible content manager, will also include some of the highlights of the programs that we mentioned throughout. I would assign everyone here homework, take 20 minutes, and just start searching through these programs, invest in your business and invest in your labor force and understanding how you can really bring that to the next level. We're in it for the long game, and incorporating some of these tools can really help drive the longevity of your business and your work environment across the board. But thank you so much, John, Waleed. A round of applause. This is such a pleasure to talk to you. And for everybody else, really appreciate you tuning in. Hope that you enjoyed it and got something out of it. And we'll see you at our next webinar, probably next month. Thanks, everybody.
Take care,
Talk
everyone.
to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.